Let's plot a mystery together. Plot your own alongside me as I play the mini game attached to my Cover Up the Crime, The Art of the Wrong Murder Substack article. Here's the false case we're working on. The setting of our mystery story is the Nettlecombe Midsummer Fete Jam Judging Tent. The incident: Prudence Thorne, the feared judge of preserves for 22 years, is slumped at the trestle table with a spoonful of raspberry conserve on her tongue. Who are our suspects? We have Marjorie Blossom, who Prudence disqualified 3 years running. She is our perfect red herring, the suspect we purposefully made look glaringly guilty early on to distract everyone from the real killer. Our next suspect is Vicar Pring, who was caught by Prudence borrowing from the church roof fund. Suspect number 3, Dr. Felicity Crandall, the new village doctor Prudence was loudly threatening to report. And the fourth suspect, Barnaby Thorne, the nephew who immediately inherits Prudence's cottage and her prize gooseberry cuttings. Sounds like a great cozy mystery to me. Now here's our challenge. It says in chapter 12, you flip the script by revealing that Prudence wasn't the target at all. The poison jar was actually Barnaby's amateur raspberry entry. It turns out Prudence had a deep, dark secret. To keep her legendary poker face intact during the public judging, she would slip to the back of the tent and secretly pre-taste the entries she dreaded the most, purely to practice not grimacing. Certain her nephew's jam would be an absolute disaster, she took a secret shortcut to practice her neutral expression. Ooh. Okay. So she was poisoned by one of these entries. But it turns out the game that we're playing is that Barnaby, our fourth suspect, was the intended target all along. All right, getting into the plotting game. Are you ready to plot alongside of me? Or just listen to me brainstorm? That's fine too. Now you need to redesign the village relationships. To keep your puzzle fair and satisfying, every new motive needs to make sense of the mid-story shock that Barnaby was the intended target, while leaving a trail of clues that fits perfectly in hindsight. So our first challenge is we need to reassign the motives. Give the remaining 3 suspects a fresh, urgent reason to want the real target, who's Barnaby, dead. Are they driven by fear, love, money, or power? Okay, so they got the wrong person. The killer got the wrong person. And now we need to figure out, if we were the author of this story, new motives. Why would Marjorie, the person who Prudence disqualified 3 years running, that's why we thought initially she wanted to harm Prudence, but why would she want to harm Barnaby? And obviously, it says here that we spent the first half of our story making her look glaringly guilty. So Marjorie seemed very obviously guilty of wanting to harm Prudence. Why would she have wanted to harm her nephew? Okay, I mean, are we taking the easy way out? But could we say Marjorie had a romantic relationship with Barnaby? So, further complicating things, that would really make her upset with Prudence. So that would make sense with how we'd written the story to this point. If we had made Marjorie look super, super guilty early on, and Prudence has disqualified her 3 years running, not even judged her harshly. It says that she disqualified her, and if Marjorie was involved in a romantic relationship with Barnaby, the nephew, who was the real intended victim, that's wow. I mean, imagine the aunt of your significant other, of your partner, disqualifying you from this competition. Huh. So maybe, okay, maybe, wait, maybe Marjorie's motive then to kill Barnaby is because they were romantically involved. So that would be a love motive. And I mean, imagine now Barnaby has submitted his own jam into the contest at the fair that Prudence was judging. What about if we found out maybe Barnaby and Marjorie, maybe Marjorie was really upset thinking Barnaby stole her jam recipe, and that's the reason why she actually wanted to harm Barnaby? And maybe Barnaby could say, no, I was doing it because I care about you, Marjorie, and I wanted to prove my Aunt Prudence wrong by submitting your entry that she disqualified for 3 years in a row out of pure spite, we believe, this romantic pair. And I wanted to make Marjorie happy. Barnaby was actually submitting her recipe under his name to prove some sort of point. I don't know. These are cozy mysteries. This doesn't have to be a real life reason for anyone who's listening that is interested in plotting a more traditional police procedural or psychological thriller with some mystery motives. I'm going the cozy mystery route, and so some of these motives might seem silly, but that is a great tangle of reveals and reasons why Marjorie could be upset about that. She maybe didn't know that Barnaby was submitting her own recipe. She just thought Barnaby was taking it. Perhaps they had just recently broken things off, and her motive is now she feels like out of spite, Barnaby is taking the one thing she was passionate about, this jam recipe, and submitting it as his own, although maybe he was trying to do it to get back together and impress her. All right. So that kind of has to do with some power motive as well. Like if Barnaby or Marjorie clearly thinks Barnaby's doing this out of spite, out of revenge. So maybe her reason for wanting to harm Barnaby instead of Prudence was out of revenge. Now let's move on to Felicity. It says here that the story was already written, that she's the new village doctor. We don't really have any information as to why Prudence was threatening to report her. So maybe that's good. That's going to make brainstorming a little bit simpler because we have more of a blank slate. We don't have to stick with how we theoretically would have already written in what Felicity was doing, that Prudence was going to report. So, Felicity's motive to kill Barnaby could still a combination fear and money motive. So we don't know what Felicity was going to report. Perhaps, I mean, I just assumed because it sounds like Prudence is a bit older, that Prudence discovered that Felicity was doing something harmful towards Prudence. But what if Prudence discovered that Felicity was somehow doing something to harm Barnaby? Perhaps, I mean, we could have a love triangle here. Perhaps Felicity had worked to break up Marjorie and Barnaby, and Felicity was maybe giving Barnaby a false diagnosis in order to see him more often. And Prudence somehow figured this out. Oh, Prudence, would she have been that clever? I don't know. But very, very cozy mystery village dynamics. Felicity's motive to kill Barnaby is because Prudence had found out that Felicity had given Barnaby a false diagnosis, so she would continue to be able to see Barnaby, and Barnaby would be in her care. And of course, this is incredibly serious. And so Felicity's motive could be not only love, maybe she was obsessed with Barnaby. It could be fear. There are a lot of layers in this one. Fear of being exposed, losing her medical license, which also would hurt her ability to make money. So there's all different motives wrapped up in this. And I am assuming Barnaby maybe started dating Felicity. Prudence filled him in on Felicity's deception. And Barnaby got upset with Felicity, broke it off, and not only broke it off, but threatened to, maybe Barnaby threatened to expose Felicity. And so, out of fear of this exposure, heck, we could even say Felicity intended to kill both Barnaby and Prudence. That could be an interesting reveal. That's not really what the instructions are saying in this game, but that is an interesting idea. Double motive there. Maybe she wanted to get rid of both of them. And what that actually makes even more sense, because it's kind of weird, right? That we have thus far that the killer has poisoned. Did they poison just the sample of what Barnaby submitted for the contest, or should we assume they're hoping Barnaby's going to take his own taste? If it only took a mere taste to poison Prudence, I mean, it stands to reason that perhaps all of Barnaby's supply, maybe he's making vats of this stuff, all of Barnaby's supply could have been poisoned. Or we're back to Felicity was intending just to harm Barnaby, and Prudence kind of got caught in the crossfire. Maybe Barnaby had no idea that Prudence was obviously doing this and submitted the sample, and it harmed his aunt. But then that I'd rather tie, I think it's more clever now that we're brainstorming. It's more clever to tie it in where she had a motive to harm both of them. Doesn't say we can't do that, and we're just going where the brainstorming leads. How are you doing thus far? Are you brainstorming alongside of me, coming up with different motives? If you're stuck, feel free to use any of these ideas. Differ from mine. Keep the same direction I'm going. I find brainstorming, the more I can talk with another person, it seeds different ideas and it kind of opens me up to going in different directions. So I hope if you're playing along with me, I hope this is helping not only kind of as an example for how to play these author mini games to practice some mystery plotting and mystery detective skills, but also it's kind of fun to brainstorm alongside someone else. All right, so let's go on to the vicar. We need to make a motive for the vicar as to why they would have wanted to kill Barnaby instead of Prudence. So let's see. The vicar, it says initially we have this set up as the vicar was caught by Prudence borrowing from the church roof fund. Well, I mean, certainly Barnaby could have been the one who caught the vicar borrowing from the church roof fund. You can always piggyback. I think that's the best place to start, is just piggybacking off of the current motive that we've established. If we were the author who had actually written the mystery to this point, we established a motive already, and we're kind of just saying, well, maybe Barnaby actually knew this as well. It is a little easier, I think, if you're writing your own story where you are going to be leading readers to believe that the person who was killed initially was the real intended target and then switch midway through to a different person. It certainly helps that Barnaby is a relative, obviously was very close with the original victim. So it's a little easier to link these motives together. Let's see if we can be a little more creative though. So right now we had the money motive. The money motive for the vicar as to why they would have wanted to harm Prudence. What if we made it a power motive? What if Barnaby was also not a great guy and found out Prudence knew the vicar was stealing from the church fund and was blackmailing the vicar. So that is a power motive. A fear motive, certainly of exposure, which caused the blackmail, but the power motive would be the vicar is feeling threatened because Prudence found this out, but actually they discovered Barnaby is the person who is blackmailing them. This Barnaby, not a great guy. That's why we have everyone, this whole family, everybody has a reason to want to harm both members of the family. All right, so we figured out some different motives. Let's go on to the second part of our mini game. It's called Seeding the Switch. You need to drop hints early in the story that Barnaby's entry was a total surprise to the village, meaning the killer had to look for his specific jar. Well, that makes sense, because otherwise, why, if you wanted to kill Prudence, would you have poisoned the jar? I mean, now, it's possible that the killer went right to Barnaby's jam, certainly, and he just happened to enter it in this contest, and his Aunt Prudence just happened to think it looked horrifying and disgusting, which is why she pre-tasted it before the judging. But okay, I think it's a little more fun if in this mystery the entry was a total surprise to the village. All right, how would you drop this hint in your story? Or is there another clever way for the killer to poison the contrast entry while intending to kill only Barnaby? For example, did they poison his entire sugar supply at home, assuming a tiny taste by a judge would only make Prudence mildly ill? Ooh, interesting. That's certainly a possibility. I mean, the way that we have brainstormed these motives, it really seems like only Marjorie and Felicity, who were both, okay, well, Felicity was kind of like stalkerish, I guess, but we kind of concluded that maybe Barnaby had started seeing her, or at least kind of gotten romantically involved due to her fooling him with a false diagnosis. So it's possible she had access to his house, and Marjorie certainly would have known about Barnaby. If we're saying her motive is driven by knowing Barnaby, was perhaps even taking Marjorie's own recipe and submitting it as a way to get back in her good graces, she might not have known that. And perhaps, I mean, we could make, now I'm going down the road where Marjorie could have been the actual potential target of the poisoning, right? I think I might be going too far here. That's okay. That's part of brain. We can always backtrack. Am I going too far? What do you think? Am I going too far here? But you see what I mean, right? I don't think the vicar would have necessarily had access to Barnaby's home if the entire village had no idea that Barnaby was intending to enter the contest. And perhaps we just need a nosy fellow judge to state, oh, yes, Prudence was horrified when she saw that it was actually Barnaby secretly dropping off this jam entry because she had no idea that he was going to enter, and he was a terrible producer of preserves. He has no skill in the kitchen, and that's why she was tasting it along with the other entries she found beneath acceptability backstage. Okay, I could see that. I mean, that could be an interesting reveal. That could be part of how, in the middle of the book, as an author, you could let everyone know Barnaby was the intended victim all along. It's not really asking us to figure that out, for which I am grateful, because that's a little beyond where I'm at mentally with how I figured out how to switch everything around. Yeah. I think I'm going to say someone intended to kill Barnaby, only The village had no idea that he was submitting this entry. In fact, we have thrown out there that we might even reveal later that he was knowingly submitting Marjorie's entry as his own, thinking that would be a grand declaration of love in some way, putting one over on his Aunt Prudence and getting her entry into the contest, hopefully winning. I just don't think the vicar would have as easy of access to Barnaby's kitchen himself, especially if we're saying Barnaby was blackmailing the vicar. I really think there's no way Barnaby is letting the vicar into his home to be able to get at this. So I do think that if Barnaby was the intended target, man, it's seeming like Marjorie, isn't it? It's seeming like Marjorie would be the killer. But that's okay. We're keeping Marjorie as the red herring. So to make the puzzle fair, now here we have to track the access. To make the puzzle fair, you have to manage access, which just means the physical opportunity a suspect had to get close to the murder weapon before the crime. Marjorie had access because ex-partner. She might have had a key to Barnaby's house to be able to poison the supply of this jam. She might have caught on to the fact and thought that he was taking her own jam and submitting it as his own entry. And she might have said, serves you right, I'm going to poison you, maybe just to make you ill, maybe not to kill you. She would have definitely had access. Felicity had access because, again, we came up with there was a love triangle here. It's possible that Felicity might have access to Barnaby's home. Felicity certainly would have had his home address if she was treating him as her patient. And we'll say this is a village, so gosh, how secure are these cute little cottages? Probably not very. If everyone knows everyone, in theory, the vicar would know where Barnaby lived. But if the Barnaby's willing to just blackmail the vicar, I don't know. I feel like the neighbors would not, nosy neighbors would have noticed in our mystery if the vicar was poking around his house. I mean, what excuse could he possibly give? Barnaby couldn't have been that great of a churchgoer or that close to the vicar to turn around and blackmail them. So I'm going to say the vicar might have had, the vicar might have had access just out of their position in the village as being someone everyone trusted. And so people aren't going to question if he's making a neighborly call at Barnaby's home, perhaps saying I'm offering counsel and comfort after the terrible breakup of Marjorie, followed by the subsequent stalking of Felicity, although that's a secret. We're assuming that's a secret because that's Felicity's motive, is to keep that quiet. I mean, I can kind of see it as that's how the vicar could have access, just using their position in the village, as of course they're innocently just visiting a parishioner and they could walk right in the front door and no one would notice. Okay, I think that works. I'm happy with that. I think that works, using the position and everyone's assumption that a vicar would have no devious reason and they would be trustworthy. So just using their position within the village to gain access to everyone's home. All right. Now, point number 4, eliminating via village secrets. The killer thought their plan was perfect because they had no clue Prudence secretly pre-tasted the entries. But this is a small village, and secrets don't stay secret for long. You can brilliantly clear a suspect in the reader's eyes by revealing they actually did know about Prudence's habit, meaning if they were the killer, they would have known their plan would backfire. Okay, all right, so we're saying that perhaps, I think where we're leading with this is it wasn't Barnaby's entire jam supply that is going to be found to have been poisoned. It's just this entry, and for some reason we think this entry is gonna knock off just Barnaby. I think you would have to, the direction that we've been going in, you would have to state that it was perhaps part of this jam contest and village celebration that after the judging, the judge takes a tiny amount, and after the fact, the everyone spreads the jam on sourdough toast or something and consumes their own entry. Okay, that could be. So which suspect finds out about Prudence's secret pre-tasting early on, proving they couldn't be the killer? Okay, I think the best reveal for this, as far as I'm concerned, is Marjorie. I mean, if anyone's gonna know, in the small village, yes, everybody gossips, but who would be willing to know something like that and keep it secret? I feel like it's Marjorie. Having been in a relationship with Barnaby and being closer to the family, they could know about Prudence's secret and, out of respect, not have revealed it to anyone. So, which suspect is completely in the dark, making them the perfect choice for the actual killer? Here's what I'm coming up with. This is now we're on to making the final calls. I think it should be Felicity. Why? Because we had already written Felicity in as new to the village. So, new village doctor was in a love triangle potential stalker situation with our real intended target, Barnaby. Certainly would know how poisons worked. That's the only downside now that I think about it. We'd have to make this poison something like rat poison or something like that. Because otherwise, wouldn't a doctor know the correct dosage where they would know that? So they wouldn't know the whole thing that we're making up where, oh, the judges just take a tiny taste test and then you could assume just by poisoning just the entry, which obviously gives so many more people access because these entries are all presumably stored somewhere where multiple people helping with this competition could access them and wouldn't have even had to go in to Barnaby's cottage to do the poisoning. But would Felicity also know about the sourdough? Everybody's got to eat the remainder of the entry. Maybe. And maybe if we weren't poisoning with something pharmaceutical, it's conceivable that maybe Felicity didn't really care if something happened to Prudence as long as they were thinking that it wouldn't take immediate effect. Maybe they weren't really familiar with a non pharmaceutical poison and we're thinking, well, Barnaby's going to eat most of it. So you could definitely, if you were the writer, I think you'd want to seed in the fact that Felicity knew that after the entries were judged, that everybody who entered took a big old scoop of their jam or preserve entry and spread it on their sourdough toast and toasted with their toast after the contest and ate it right then and there. And they were predicting that Barnaby would eat the majority of it himself. And look, I mean, if we have this set up originally that Barnaby had a motive to want to kill Prudence, I mean, they're not that close. So certainly just Prudence getting a little bit sick in the killer's mind would not be a reason for this Barnaby, her nephew, to not participate with the rest of the village, also chowing down on his jam or preserve entry. He doesn't seem like he would care much, right? If he's a suspect in the beginning of the book. So I think I'm choosing that my killer is Dr. Felicity just because they're new in town. So it makes sense. I mean, it really seems like through brainstorming that at least the motives I came up with and the access and the way that this killer planned this out, it should be someone who knew enough, but not everything, about the way this jam competition goes down. So I think it's the new person in town. I think the doctor is where I ended up in my brainstorming. Who are you getting? Have you deviated from where I'm at? All right. And I think the main red herring, I do think it's Marjorie still. I don't think the red herring changes, just with who's keeping all these secrets from everyone else, but would have also known. That's like such a great red herring reveal for the moment before the aha moment at the end of a mystery, is that Marjorie would have known that Prudence was going to do a quick taste test, and perhaps you could lead the reader to believe it should have just made Prudence sick. It should not have fully killed her. All right, top tier misdirection tip. For maximum storytelling payoff, give your killer a double duty motive. This is a motive that initially seems to explain a grudge against Prudence, but when the reader looks closer after the twist, where we find out it's Barnaby, it points straight to a desire to eliminate Barnaby. The example given is perhaps maybe the vicar's panic over Prudence discovering his theft matters because Barnaby is the church trustee who actually signs the bank audits. Ah, that's clever. Yeah. I think it still stands because we are essentially linking whatever Prudence was going to report about Felicity to the fact that what she was going to report was actually Felicity doing something to Barnaby, the intended victim. So I think we nailed it without trying. Does that work for whatever you've been brainstorming, or do you need to think of a different motive for whoever you picked for the killer to kind of tie them into a grudge against both Prudence and something that points to a desire to eliminate Barnaby? All right, and bonus twist, the ultimate inversion. What if our accidental victim, Prudence, was actually the one trying to commit the murder? Okay, so if Prudence poisoned the jam to get rid of her nephew Barnaby, why on earth did she put a spoonful of his lethal jam into her own mouth? You can't have your brilliant villain accidentally poison herself without a very good reason. So that is clever. To make this shocking ending work, you have to fix the logic of the puzzle. How will you change the plot so she willingly takes a taste? Choose your strategy or write your own. Okay, we have 3 hints of strategies here. Strategy A, total ignorance. Like the rest of the village, Prudence actually had no idea this specific jar belonged to Barnaby. She poisoned his sugar supply at his cottage earlier that morning, expecting him to eat it for breakfast. I guess spread it on cereal, or they really like sugary coffee. All right, so how did Barnaby's poison home jar secretly end up in the judging tent without Prudence realizing? I mean, okay, with what we've brainstormed thus far, that could work if we said that it was actually Marjorie's jam that she made with the poison sugar, perhaps reuniting with Barnaby, and Barnaby said, I'm going to secretly submit this for you and will prove Prudence wrong so I can prove my love to you. That could be. And if Prudence didn't know it was Barnaby's submission, or she thought it was Barnaby dropping off Marjorie's again, and knows Marjorie makes her jam months in advance, because Prudence seems to have a real problem with Marjorie's jam. Maybe that's why she would never think that Barnaby, who isn't a great cook, so it makes sense, he's just spooning sugar like crazy on top of his breakfast or in his coffee. And that could be. Okay, strategy B, the devilish label swap. Prudence knew exactly which jar was Barnaby's and planned to stay far away from it. Oh, I see. So maybe Prudence knew Barnaby was entering. She poisoned Barnaby's specific entry, planned to avoid tasting it or take a tiny taste. Presumably while they're judging, they're not right next to folks. Maybe they're up on a stage and she was just going to make it look like she took a taste. However, a mischievous villager or a mix up swapped the entry labels right before she went back for her secret pre tasting. All right, so Prudence thinks maybe she was tasting a safe jam and someone else, I don't know why a mischievous villager would want to do something like that, but maybe we've got a kid involved. I don't know. Maybe we've got someone. Ooh, maybe it's Marjorie trying to prove some sort of a point and switching the entry labels between Barnaby and her jams. Maybe that's what she's doing. Strategy C, the miscalculated recipe. Prudence knew it was Barnaby's jar. She knowingly poisoned it, but she completely misunderstood how her weapon worked. Okay, we kind of hit that before in brainstorming. Did she think the poison required a massive dose to be lethal, meaning a tiny liquid would be safe? Did she mistake a fast-acting poison for a slow-acting one, planning to slip away and take an antidote later? Oh, if you're an Agatha Christie fan, that happened in a Christie mystery. I'm not going to spoil it, but planning to slip away and take an antidote later. If you know, you know. Do you know the mystery? Okay. My logical fix to make Prudence the killer is I feel like something with the label swap. But that we'll find out it was Marjorie label swapping. I'm stuck on this. Everyone. I'm stuck on the fact that in a romantic act of love, Barnaby was somehow submitting Marjorie's jam to like legitimize her jam, but actually, like in a Shakespearean comedy of errors, Marjorie thought he was doing it to show her up somehow or something. I don't know. So I'm going with like a label swap, and maybe it was Marjorie also submitting her jam under her own name. I don't know. There's something there. I feel like there's something there that you could make work. All right. Okay. So, who did you come up with as the main red herring and the killer? Did you go the same direction as I did and you thought it had to be the new person in town, Dr. Felicity Crandall? What do you think about these outlandish motives? We're in cozy mystery land. That's all people need to want to commit murder, apparently, is a bit of drama surrounding jam. Thank you so much, and I hope this helps you in plotting your next mystery or in having fun when you're watching your next mystery. Stay cozy.